The next morning, Shin woke up early, washed his face, brushed his teeth, and headed to the training ground. He focused on taijutsu and kenjutsu, leaving ninjutsu practice for later. Well, not here, at least. He had sent several shadow clones to secluded areas in Konoha to train in ninjutsu. When the clones dispersed, their memories and experiences would return to him, making it an efficient way to train. Sharingan activate. Shin's eyes turned crimson, 3 tomo swirling within. Still just a 3 tomo Sharingan. When will it evolve into the Mangekyo? Shin sighed. Over the past year, he had used his 3 common replication cards, copying the Sharingan prowess of Uchiha Jonin. He had discovered that he could copy the same ability from the same person multiple times. All 3 copies were from Uchiha Ryota, the Jonin he had encountered at the ramen shop. These repeated copies had significantly increased his ocular power. Even elite Uchiha probably couldn't match him in that regard. But his Sharingan still hadn't evolved into the Mangekyo, which was disappointing. Did he really need to copy an existing Mangekyo Sharingan? He could, technically. He had 2 advanced replication cards. One was a reward from a mission, and the other was from the system's annual gift. He had been lucky that year. He had the cards, but where could he find an Uchiha with a Mangekyo Sharingan? Did any even exist right now? He wasn't sure. And even if they did, he had no way to approach them. The 3 tomo Sharingan was still useful. It granted enhanced visual perception, the ability to copy basic jutsu and taijutsu, and even some genjutsu. But compared to the Mangekyo Sharingan, it was flawed. He wouldn't mention that to anyone though. Shin deactivated his Sharingan. He couldn't let Tsunade see it. Who knew what kind of trouble it might cause? After training for a while, he went back to prepare breakfast. Neither Kushina nor Tsunade were the type to cook. "Yo, Shin, you're up early as always." Tsunade had just woken up and saw that Shin had already prepared breakfast. "It's nice having someone make breakfast. I never used to eat breakfast," she said, taking a seat at the table. "That explains why you're so underdeveloped." Shin glanced at her chest. Had his transmigration somehow affected Tsunade's development? It was a cruel twist of fate. Sensing his pitying gaze, Tsunade scowled. "Want to taste my fist? I'll go wake Kushina up." Shin made a quick escape. Tsunade snorted, then glanced down at her chest. It was a bit small. "Damn that brat. I'm still growing," she grumbled, digging into the breakfast Shin had prepared. If Shin had heard her, he would have scoffed. She was already 17. In the world of shinobi, that was practically an adult. Shin entered Kushina's room. He stared at the mess, speechless. It had only been 2 days since he last cleaned her room, and it was already a disaster zone. Unlike other girls with their tidy rooms, Kushina's was always chaotic. It was clear she wasn't the most organized person. "Kushina, wake up." Shin nudged her. Her sleeping position was interesting. "Ugh, I'm so tired. 5 more minutes." Kushina mumbled, her eyes still closed, her arms wrapping around Shin. "It's getting late. If you don't get up now, we'll be late for school." "No, I don't want to get up." Kushina snuggled closer to Shin, enjoying the warmth and comfort. "This is so comfy. Shin, let's sleep together from now on, okay?" "Sure, if you don't mind." "I'm not complaining," Shin said with a smile. Sleeping with Kushina would be like cuddling a soft pillow. It wouldn't be bad. "I don't mind at all. Let's sleep together from now on." Kushina opened her eyes, looking at Shin with a bright smile. "All right, let's get up and eat breakfast first. Otherwise, Tsunade will finish it all." "But I'm so sleepy." Kushina rubbed her eyes. She had trained late last night and hadn't gotten enough sleep. "Were you refining chakra again? Don't push yourself too hard. It's not good for you," Shin said sternly. "And it's not just about having a lot of chakra. There's more to strength than that. You need to know how to use it. Having chakra without knowing any jutsu is useless." "But I know Jutsul the Rasengan, the Water Dragon Jutsu, the Shadow Clone Jutsu." Kushina counted off the jutsu she knew. They were all jutsu that Shin knew and had taught her. "You haven't mastered them yet. Focus on honing your jutsu. Don't worry about chakra refinement for now. Shin pulled Kushina out of bed. Wait, can you go outside? I need to change. Kushina was usually carefree, but she wouldn't change clothes in front of Shin. All right. Shin left the room. When he returned, he found that Tsunade had already devoured most of the breakfast. You sure can eat. He'd have to make more. It wasn't enough for the three of them. You're one to talk. I'm full. Gotta go. I have things to do. Tsunade pinched Shin's cheek and left. Shin made more breakfast, and after they finished eating, they left for the academy. Aren't we taking lunch today? Kushina asked. Kushina, remember? Mikoto said she'd make us lunch. She's a much better cook than I am. Humph, I can cook too. It's just lunch. I'll make you lunch tomorrow. Kushina was jealous that Shin had praised Mikoto's cooking. Shin's face paled. Kushina making him lunch? Kushina, let's not. I don't want to end up in the hospital, or worse, the cemetery. He wouldn't dare eat anything she made. Shin and Kushina arrived at the academy just in time. But someone was even later, Nawaki. Under Shin's amused gaze, Nawaki was sent out to stand in the hallway as punishment. Where's Akiko? Shin scanned the classroom, but Akiko was nowhere to be seen. Shin, what are you thinking about? Mikoto asked curiously, noticing his distraction. I was just wondering why Akiko isn't here. Kushina, who had been drowsy, suddenly perked up, her eyes fixed on Shin. Shin, don't tell me you have a thing for Akiko, she asked suspiciously. Kushina, your eyes are scary, Mikoto giggled. I'm not interested in Akiko. I was just curious, Shin said, a bit exasperated. He had no interest in little girls. He wasn't a creep. Besides, Akiko wasn't as pretty as Kushina or Mikoto. I have an announcement regarding Uzumaki Akiko. I'm sure many of you are wondering why she isn't here today. Tanaka-sensei stood at the podium. Akiko has taken a leave of absence. She won't be coming to school for a while. Shin pondered the announcement, a suspicion forming in his mind. After class, Shin approached Kai. Kai, you live with Akiko. Do you know why she's absent? Why should I tell you? Kai glared at Shin. Good question. How about this? Shin placed a hand on Kai's shoulder, applying pressure. Kai broke out in a cold sweat, his shoulder screaming in pain. He didn't cry out, though, maintaining his pride. But he quickly caved. Akiko was called away early this morning. I think she went to Lady Mito's place. Thanks for the info. Shin smiled and returned to his seat, his suspicions confirmed. He guessed that Akiko had been chosen as the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. He didn't know why Akiko, but it was good news for him and Kushina. Becoming a Jinchuriki wasn't a good thing. Not everyone could be like Naruto and gain the tailed beast's approval. Shin, you've never cared about Akiko before. Why are you suddenly interested in her? Kushina asked when Shin returned to his seat. She knew Shin wasn't romantically interested in Akiko, but she couldn't help but feel jealous. Because it's important to us, Shin said cryptically. If he or Kushina had been chosen as the Jinchuriki, he would have had to find a way to refuse. Now, he didn't have to worry about that. Akiko's absence meant she was probably receiving special training from Mito. Becoming a Jinchuriki wasn't easy. It required rigorous preparation. After school, they received a notice that they wouldn't be attending Mito's lessons for the time being. Shin wasn't disappointed. He had already learned everything he needed to know. Mind's Eye of Kagura. Shin closed his eyes, and his surroundings appeared in his mind. He could sense chakra with incredible clarity. He had awakened the Mind's Eye of Kagura, a secret technique that only the Uzumaki clan could learn. Mito had taught it to him. She had also taught it to the others, but he didn't know if they had mastered it. Kushina hadn't. He doubted Kai and Akiko had either. He scanned the entire Senju compound and its surroundings with his expanded sensory range. He continued using the Mind's Eye of Kagura for an hour before finally opening his eyes, exhaustion weighing on him. It was mental exhaustion. The chakra cost was minimal, but the strain on his mind was significant, especially with prolonged use. But it had its benefits. It slowly increased his mental power. It was one of the ways he had found to strengthen his mind. The other method was to use the system's replication cards to copy Uchiha ocular prowess. Looks like Tsunade isn't coming back. Let's eat. Shin exited his room and announced to Kushina. I've been waiting forever. I'm starving. Kushina whined dramatically. Shin chuckled and prepared a lavish dinner. They had money now. There was no need to be frugal. After dinner, Shin trained his taijutsu and kenjutsu in the training ground. He then dispelled his shadow clones, absorbing their memories and experiences. He had secretly sent them out to train in ninjutsu. Shin organized the knowledge he had gained, refined chakra for an hour, then took a bath and prepared for bed. Just as he lay down, his door creaked open, and Kushina entered, clutching a blanket. Shin stared at her, bewildered. Kushina, what are you doing in my room? Shouldn't you be sleeping? Did you forget what you said this morning? We're sleeping together from now on. You promised. Don't tell me you're going back on your word. Kushina tried to sound fierce, but Shin only saw cuteness. Fierce cuteness. Kushina, you're really going to sleep with me? Shin asked, surprised. Of course. And we've slept together before, haven't we? Kushina climbed onto the tatami mat, snuggled up next to Shin, wrapped her arms around him, and rested her head on his chest. That was when we were little. Don't you feel awkward now, Kushina? Shin inhaled the sweet scent of her hair. Not at all. I feel comfortable sleeping with you, Shin. Kushina snuggled closer, nuzzling him. Shin wasn't going to argue. That would be stupid. All right, let's get some sleep. But try to stay still, okay? No moving around. Shin, do you dislike me? Kushina pouted. Even in the darkness, with only the moonlight filtering through the window, Shin could see her expression. Even if I were to dislike someone, it wouldn't be you. Now go to sleep. Shin pinched her cheek and closed his eyes, enjoying the warmth of this human-shaped pillow. Kushina also felt comfortable and safe in Shin's arms. She quickly drifted off to sleep. Time flew by like a rushing river, and 4 years passed in the blink of an eye. Throughout those years, Shin diligently attended the Ninja Academy. As for graduating early, no, that had never crossed his mind. Now, it was finally time for him to graduate. Currently, the Academy's program was 5 years, a year shorter than it would be in the future. The graduation exam is coming up soon. Are you nervous, Shin? Nawaki sidled up to Shin, his voice laced with anxiety. Graduating required passing an exam, and the current exam was more challenging than the one in the future. First, you had to demonstrate proficiency in the Academy 3, the Substitution Jutsu, Transformation Jutsu, and Clone Jutsu. Then, you had to survive a spar against a Chunin for 10 minutes. Only then could you graduate. Otherwise, you were held back. The Academy recognized that surviving 10 minutes against a Chunin was a tall order for a student, so they allowed them to form teams. Teams could have up to 3 members. As long as one member survived the full 10 minutes, the entire team passed. That made it a bit easier. I'm not nervous, but you seem to be, Nawaki. Shin noticed Nawaki's trembling hands. Yeah, a little. It would be embarrassing to fail. How about we team up? Sorry, I've already teamed up with Kushina and Mikoto. You'll have to find someone else. Shin glanced at Kushina and Mikoto, then back at Nawaki. It was obvious who he'd rather be with. Fine. I knew it. I was going to carry you, but I guess you don't need my help. Nawaki sulked. Soon, Tanaka-sensei arrived and announced the start of the exam. The morning was dedicated to the Jutsu Proficiency Test. This part was easy for everyone in the class. They were in the elite class, after all. Either clan members or exceptionally talented civilians. The Academy 3 posed no challenge to them. After the morning session, they didn't go home. They ate the lunch Mikoto had prepared in a quiet corner of the training ground. We're finally graduating. Does that mean we can go on missions now? Kushina asked excitedly. Mikoto was unusually quiet, her expression downcast. What's wrong, Mikoto? Are you worried about the exam? Shin asked. No, I'm confident I'll pass. But we'll be separated after graduation, won't we? Mikoto looked at Shin, her voice laced with sadness. Don't worry, Mikoto. Maybe we'll all be assigned to the same team. Kushina said, trying to sound cheerful. But even she was worried about being separated from Shin. If you don't like your assigned team, you can always request a transfer. Shin reassured them. There was no need to worry. They could always ask Tsunade for help. Mikoto and Kushina relaxed, relieved. In the afternoon, the second part of the graduation exam commenced. Even Hiruzen Sarutobi was present. He wouldn't normally pay attention to a graduation exam, but this wasn't an ordinary class. The students in this class were the future of Konoha. Even Hiruzen couldn't ignore them. And it wasn't just Hiruzen. Danzo was also observing, looking for promising recruits for his root organization. After forming their teams, they were assigned their opponents. Shin's team was up against a Chunin who looked about 16. Being a Chunin at 16 had made him arrogant. He looked down on the academy students. As a Chunin who had completed several missions, he saw these students as pampered flowers who had never experienced real combat. He didn't even bother hiding his disdain. You three brats should just surrender. Don't blame me if I'm rough. Kimura, their opponent, held his kunai, his eyes filled with contempt. We'll see how rough you can get. Kimura's arrogance annoyed Shin. He was just a lowly Chunin. What was he so smug about? You're asking for it. Kimura sensed Shin's disdain and felt a surge of anger. A mere academy student, looking down on him, a real shinobi? He was determined to make sure Shin didn't graduate. With that attitude, you'd think you were a Kage. What's with the arrogance, newbie? Shin said calmly. He disliked this Chunin from the start. Just a Chunin, and he dared to look down on him? Did he think he was Madara Uchiha? Begin. No lethal force. The Chunin examiner announced. He was there to assess their performance and ensure no one got killed. No need for you two to get involved. I'll take care of him, Shin said to Kushina and Mikoto. He walked towards Kimura, his steps measured and confident. Kimura glared at Shin, enraged by his casual attitude. I'll show you the difference between you and a real shinobi. He charged at Shin, his speed impressive. Well, impressive for a regular person. To Shin, he was moving in slow motion. Kimura lunged, thrusting his kunai towards Shin. He aimed for non-lethal areas. He wasn't going to kill him. He wouldn't kill, but he wouldn't hesitate to injure. Weakling. Shin casually deflected the kunai and punched Kimura in the gut. Kimura flew backward like a cannonball, crashing to the ground. He twitched a few times, then passed out. Examiner-san, I believe we passed. Shin looked at the examiner, who was staring at him with his jaw hanging open. Shin chuckled. He had shocked the examiner. He had revealed a bit of his strength, but he didn't care anymore. He wasn't the same weakling he used to be. Before, he had hidden his strength because he was weak. But now, he was strong enough to not have to hide. In 4 years, his taijutsu, ninjutsu, and kenjutsu had improved drastically. Most importantly, his 3-tomo Sharingan had evolved into the Mangekyo Sharingan. The Mangekyo Sharingan, combined with his perfect sage body, meant he could use its powers without fear of blindness. What did he have to fear now? It was time to step into the spotlight. Shin, Kushina, and Mikoto left the exam area. Mikoto stared at Shin, her mouth slightly agape. Shin, how are you so strong? She was astonished. One punching a Chunin? Even most Jonin couldn't do that. It's not that I'm strong, it's that he was weak. Shin didn't consider himself strong. Compared to powerhouses like Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, he was still a fledgling. Kushina, aren't you surprised? Did you know Shin was this strong? Mikoto looked at Kushina with envy. Living with Shin, she must have known all about his abilities. Of course I knew. And I'm stronger than that guy, let alone Shin. Kushina was indeed stronger than Kimura, the Chunin they had faced. She might lack combat experience, but her raw power was undeniable. Kushina's strength was probably at elite Chunin level. Considering her knowledge of ninjutsu and fuinjutsu, She might even be comparable to a Tokubetsu Jonin. But her combat experience was lacking. Her actual fighting prowess was probably at the level of an elite Chunin. Mikoto was also quite strong. She had awakened the Sharingan, and even though it was only at the 1 Tomo stage, it still gave her an edge against Chunin. Even without Shin's help, she could probably hold her own against Kimura. She was talented. They returned to the classroom to await their team assignments. Soon, Minato, Akiko, and Izumi Inuzuka returned. They had been a team. "You're back already? Did you pass?" Minato asked. Failing the graduation exam would be embarrassing. "You defeated the Chunin, right?" Shin asked. They must have defeated the Chunin to be back so soon. Minato and Akiko were both strong. There was no way they would fail. Judging from his usual performance, Minato's strength was easily Chunin level. Akiko, chosen as a Jinchuriki candidate, had been trained by Mito and was probably just as strong as Minato. As for Tsum, she was from the Inuzuka clan and was also comparable to a Chunin. Even Minato alone could defeat a Chunin, let alone the three of them together. Yep. Minato was beaming. He was still young and inexperienced, so defeating a Chunin was a big deal to him. The future Minato, at his peak, wouldn't even blink at killing a Jonin. A while later, Nawaki returned with the Hyuga brothers. They had also defeated their opponent. "Shin, that Chunin was so weak. We crushed him." "Yeah, Chunin are pretty weak," Shin agreed. "Shin, we're not officially Chunin yet." "It's not good to say that," Hayashi said. "I meant the average Chunin." Shin was referring to the average Chunin. There were exceptions, of course. The future protagonists, Naruto and Sasuke, and Might Due, Might Guy's father, were all Chunin, but they were far from average. Soon, everyone in the class returned. As the elite class, they had all passed. If even the elite students couldn't pass, the regular classes would have no hope. Tanaka-sensei entered the classroom, carrying a box. "You are all officially shinobi now. Here are your forehead protectors. Come and get them." The box contained their forehead protectors, a symbol of their graduation and their new status as shinobi. Also, team assignments will be announced tomorrow morning, so please come back then. Tanaka-sensei dismissed the class. Nawaki invited his friends to celebrate, including Shin and the others. As dusk fell, Shin and Kushina said goodbye to Mikoto and headed back to the Senju compound with Nawaki. "Hey, Nawaki, where did you get the money?" Shin asked. Nawaki had treated them to dinner. "Where did he get the money? Sis hasn't borrowed any money from me for the past few years. I've been saving up. And now that I'm a shinobi, I'll be making my own money." Shin shook his head. Did Nawaki really think making money as a shinobi was easy? Small missions barely paid anything, and the high-paying ones were dangerous. Back at the compound, Shin stopped Nawaki before he could go to his own residence. "Nawaki, you dream of becoming Hokage, right? Now that you're a shinobi, you'll be facing danger. Be careful." Nawaki paused, then smiled. "Don't worry, I'll be fine. You and Kushina should be the ones being careful." Nawaki left. Shin and Kushina returned to Tsunade's courtyard. To their surprise, Tsunade was home. "Surprised to see me?" Tsunade asked, noticing their expressions. "Yeah, you said you'd be gone for a few days on a mission. What are you doing here?" Shin's eyes swept over Tsunade's figure. Her most noticeable change in the past 4 years was, well, there. He couldn't fathom how she had gone from an airport to a mountain range. "The mission was cancelled. Now hurry up and make me dinner. I'm starving." "Humph, why should Shin cook for you? We already ate." "You're on your own," Kushina stuck her tongue out at Tsunade. "Shin, if you make me dinner, I'll give you a surprise tomorrow." Tsunade ignored Kushina and looked at Shin expectantly. "A surprise?" Shin looked at her thoughtfully. "Hey, what's with that look? I hate that know-it-all expression." "Fine, I'll make you dinner. I look forward to your surprise." Shin smiled and headed to the kitchen. Kushina and Tsunade glared at each other. "Why don't you make your own dinner? Why bother Shin?" Kushina grumbled. "Duh, if I could cook, I wouldn't be starving," Tsunade rolled her eyes. Tsunade's cooking skills were, well, let's just say they were on par with Kushina's. Wait, you said you already ate? Tsunade suddenly remembered Kushina's earlier comment. Yeah, we had yakiniku. Nawaki treated us. It was delicious, crispy and juicy, Kushina said, deliberately trying to make Tsunade jealous. Tsunade gritted her teeth. That little rascal, treating everyone but his own sister. Of course, Nawaki had no idea she was home. It was 11 at night. Kushina tiptoed into Shin's room. Shin was still awake. Shin, I'm here to sleep with you. Kushina lunged towards him, but a hand shot out and grabbed her by the collar. Hey! Put me down, Tsunade! You meanie! Kushina shrieked, glaring at Tsunade. She hadn't expected Tsunade to be awake at this hour. Humph, I knew you'd sneak in here. Back to your own room, young lady. Tsunade dragged Kushina away, ignoring her protests. Kushina cast a pleading look at Shin, but he could only offer a helpless shrug. Tsunade, what's it to you if I sleep with Shin? Kushina demanded. You're both too old to be sharing a bed now. Tsunade ignored Kushina's further protests and tossed her back into her own room. Kushina pouted, defeated. The next morning, at breakfast, Kushina glared at Tsunade before dragging Shin off to school. Little brat, still glaring at me? Just you wait, Tsunade muttered under her breath. At the academy, Shin noticed that they were the last to arrive. Even Nawaki, who was usually late, was already there. The students, all wearing their forehead protectors, were a mix of excitement and nervousness. After the team assignments, they would be real shinobi, ready to go on missions. Shin, who do you think your Jonin-sensei will be? Nawaki asked excitedly. My guess is your sister, Tsunade, Shin replied. Tsunade had promised him a surprise yesterday, and he suspected this was it. Really? Did she tell you? Did she say who my sensei would be? Nawaki looked at Shin with anticipation. She didn't tell me. It's just a guess. Who do you want your sensei to be, Nawaki? Shin shook his head. It wasn't confirmed, but he was pretty sure Tsunade would be their Jonin sensei. I want Orochimaru-sama. Nawaki's eyes shone with admiration. He seemed genuinely eager to be on Orochimaru's team. Shin gave him a strange look. Orochimaru? What was so appealing about him? Then he remembered that Orochimaru did have a certain charisma. In the original story, many were devoted to him. I don't understand why you like that creepy guy. Shin shook his head. He didn't dislike Orochimaru, but he didn't particularly like him either. The current Orochimaru wasn't as sinister or twisted as he would become. Orochimaru-sama is a genius, one of the strongest in Konoha. He's way stronger than my sister. Nawaki seemed to idolize Orochimaru. Don't let your sister hear you say that, or you'll be in trouble, Kushina warned. Settle down. Tanaka-sensei entered the classroom. Seeing the chaos, his face darkened. Nawaki scurried back to his seat, and the others followed suit. Tanaka-sensei was still a formidable presence. The team assignments began. One by one, Jonin entered the classroom, read out the names of their team members, and left. Team 3, Senju Nawaki, Uzumaki Kai, Hyuga Hisashi. Orochimaru entered, read the names, and left without a word. Nawaki's face lit up. He couldn't believe he was actually on Orochimaru's team. He rushed out with Kai and Hisashi. Team 5, Namikaze Minato, Uzumaki Akiko, Inazuka Tsume. Follow me. Jiraiya entered and called out the names. Minato and his team left. The classroom was getting emptier. Uzumaki Shin, Uzumaki Kushina, Uchiha Mikoto, you three are Team 9. Come with me. When only a few students remained, Tsunade entered and called out their names. Shin smiled. He had guessed correctly. Tsunade was their Jonin sensei. They followed Tsunade to a training ground in Konoha. Shin, you don't seem surprised at all, Tsunade observed. I already guessed it was you. This must be the surprise you mentioned. Humph, you guessed it again. How annoying. Kushina scowled. She wasn't thrilled about having Tsunade as their sensei. She almost wanted to request a transfer. Mikoto, however, was delighted. Not because of Tsunade, but because she was on the same team as Shin and Kushina. "Now, I'll assess your abilities." "Don't hold back," Tsunade said. She wasn't going to give them another test, but gauging their strength was necessary. As their Jonin sensei, she needed to know their capabilities to assign them appropriate missions. "Is this assessment really necessary?" Shin asked. "Of course. I can't assign you missions without knowing your strength. Unless you want to do D-rank missions, then we can skip this." There were 5 mission ranks in Konoha. D-rank missions were the lowest, simple tasks with no combat or risk, such as weeding, babysitting, and cleaning the streets. C-rank missions involved some risk of injury, but no combat against enemy shinobi. B-rank missions were dangerous, often involving combat and the risk of death. A-rank missions were even more dangerous, often involving Jonin or stronger opponents. Genin weren't allowed to participate in these. S-rank missions were the most dangerous, involving the safety of the village or even the nation. They were rare, but when they did occur, they were a big deal. S-rank missions required elite Jonin or even Kaga-level shinobi. They were the highest-paying missions, but also the most perilous. Fresh graduates usually started with D-rank missions. But it seemed Tsunade wasn't planning on giving them those. That was fine with Shin. He had no interest in those low-level missions. They wouldn't help him improve, and the pay was pathetic. Besides, he didn't need the money. "Come on, attack me with all your might. If you impress me, I might even give you a reward." Tsunade tried to motivate them with the promise of a reward. "You don't have to tell me twice." Kushina cracked her knuckles, eager to fight. If she could defeat Tsunade, she'd be ecstatic. "Then let's begin." Tsunade didn't waste any time. She lunged at Kushina, her fist aimed at her head. Shin reacted instantly, pulling Kushina out of the way. He then grabbed Mikoto and leaped back, putting distance between them and Tsunade. "Hey, Tsunade, you're an elite Jonin, attacking 3 genin fresh out of the academy? And you're not even holding back. That's shameless." "What did you say, brat?" Tsunade glared at Shin. How dare he call her shameless? If they were ordinary genin, she might have been going a bit overboard, but Shin, Kushina, and Mikoto were far from ordinary. She didn't know the extent of Shin's strength, but she knew he was a genius among geniuses. When he was 5, she had estimated his strength to be at elite Chunin level. No. Who knew? As for Kushina, as an Uzumaki, she couldn't be weak. And Uchiha Mikoto. While Tsunade didn't know her well, she was an Uchiha. She couldn't be weak either. "Take this." This time, Tsunade targeted Shin. He had called her shameless. Now he would pay. Fire style, fireball jutsu. Mikoto formed hand seals and unleashed a fireball at Tsunade. Tsunade was impressed. Not many genin fresh out of the academy could use jutsu, let alone with such proficiency. Uchiha Mikoto was definitely a genius. Despite Mikoto being an Uchiha, Tsunade held no prejudice against her. She had gotten to know Mikoto and liked her personality. Unlike most Uchiha, Mikoto was gentle and kind. That was why she had been allowed to join this class. Tsunade channeled chakra to her fist, and with a powerful burst of air pressure, extinguished the fireball. "Shin, let's see how much you've improved." Tsunade lunged at Shin, her fist propelled by a gust of wind that forced Kushina and Mikoto to retreat. "She's serious." Shin clenched his fist. He didn't dodge, meeting Tsunade's attack head-on. The ground beneath his feet cracked. Tsunade was thrown back several meters, her arm numb. But the numbness was nothing to her. She used the mystical palm jutsu, and the numbness vanished. "Brat, how are you so strong?" Tsunade asked, bewildered. She had used her monstrous strength, yet she was the one sent flying. "Simple. If you trained as hard as I do, you wouldn't be so weak," Shin said with a smirk. "Weak? You think you're stronger than me just because you landed a lucky punch? I wasn't even using my full strength." Tsunade was amused. "And you think I was?" Shin's eyes gleamed. He decided to fight Tsunade seriously. This was a good opportunity to test his strength. He wasn't afraid to reveal his power anymore. He might as well let Tsunade help him gauge his progress. Tsunade, use your full strength, or I might just send you to the hospital. Shin's chakra flared, powerful enough to peel back the ground and shake the surrounding trees. Tsunade gulped. Was this kid a monster? How could he have so much chakra? She had thought her chakra reserves were impressive, but compared to Shin's, they were nothing. She felt like even a tailed beast's chakra might be comparable. She knew the Uzumaki clan had large chakra reserves, but this was ridiculous. Composing herself, Tsunade said, "Your chakra is impressive, Shin, but chakra alone doesn't determine strength. You had to be able to use it effectively." "You're right. But I'm strong in every aspect." As soon as he finished speaking, Shin vanished. A wave of intense danger washed over Tsunade, sending chills down her spine. It had been a long time since she had felt this threatened. But her reflexes were still sharp. She activated her monstrous strength and dodged. Just as she moved, Shin's axe kick landed where she had been standing. Missing his target, his foot slammed into the ground. Boom! A massive crater formed, the ground around Shin collapsing. Tsunade's jaw dropped. That kick was devastating. Even her strongest attack, the heavenly foot of pain, couldn't cause this much destruction. And his speed! She had barely dodged in time. If that had connected, she would have been done for. Missed. Too bad, Shin said with a smile. Brat, are you trying to kill me? Tsunade grumbled. If you couldn't dodge, I would have stopped at the last moment. I have control. What if you couldn't stop in time? Shin sighed. Well, then there's nothing I can do. I'll visit your grave next year. Kushina, who had been stunned into silence, burst out laughing. Her laughter snapped Mikoto out of her daze. She stared at Shin in disbelief. That kick must have been A-rank level. How could he be so strong? If they knew that wasn't even his full power, they might faint. Shin had only used 80% of his strength. He could have done even more damage. He had never neglected his taijutsu training. With shadow clones helping him train in ninjutsu and fuinjutsu, he had focused mostly on taijutsu and kenjutsu. And kenjutsu training also improved his taijutsu. With his perfect sage body, even without training, he would have been physically strong. But he had trained diligently. And he had also copied the physique of a taijutsu master. His physical strength couldn't be judged by his age. Not only could his chakra rival that of a tailed beast, but so could his strength. He wondered how he compared to the third Raikage in terms of physical prowess. Perhaps the current third Raikage was still stronger. After all, he was much older and had decades more experience. But in terms of potential, Shin was far superior. The third Raikage had already reached his peak, while Shin still had room to grow. Tsunade, are we going to continue our spar? Shin asked. Of course. You think I'm afraid of a little brat like you? Tsunade's chakra flared as she activated her strength of 100 seal. Her punches and kicks now carned monstrous power. Come on, show me what you've got. Tsunade was taking Shin seriously now. After his display of strength and speed, she couldn't underestimate him. She used the body flicker jutsu to close the distance, then aimed a punch at Shin's face. Trying to rearrange my face, are you? Shin blocked the punch and grabbed her wrist, flinging her away. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. Shin unleashed a massive fireball, far more powerful than Mikoto's. It was a C-rank jutsu, but in his hands, it rivaled a B-rank. He had Mikoto to thank for this jutsu. She had taught it to him. That's incredible. Mikoto gasped, her eyes wide. Shin's fireball jutsu was over 10 times stronger than hers. Tsunade, airborne, quickly formed hand seals and used the substitution jutsu, replacing herself with a log. But the danger wasn't over. Shin appeared behind her, a Rasengan swirling in his hand. How is he so fast? Relying on her years of battle experience, Tsunade narrowly dodged the Rasengan. If I had used the adamantine sealing chains, you'd be down for the count, Tsunade, Shin remarked. The chains would have restrained her, leaving her vulnerable to the Rasengan. Tsunade had a weakness, her lack of long-range attacks. Relying solely on taijutsu put her at a disadvantage. Where did you learn that jutsu? It doesn't require any hand seals. Tsunade asked, referring to the Rasengan. She understood the significance of a jutsu that could be activated instantly. I created it, Shin replied casually. Minato hadn't invented it yet, so Shin could claim credit. You're full of surprises. I thought you were a genius, but you're a monster. Is that a compliment or an insult, Tsunade? Shin asked, rubbing his nose. Humph, let's continue. I won't be defeated by a brat like you. Hold on. Shin stopped her. He wasn't interested in fighting anymore. He had a good grasp of his strength now. Besides, fighting Tsunade with restrictions was boring. There's no point continuing. Let's call it a draw. Shin was being generous. If they continued, Tsunade would lose. You win, brat. I admit defeat. Tsunade glared at him. She knew she couldn't defeat him. It was embarrassing, but she wasn't afraid to admit it. How did you get so strong? Tsunade was an elite jonin, bordering on Kage level. She might even reach that level soon. But she couldn't defeat a 10-year-old? No one would believe it. That's the difference between a genius and an common person. Reality is cruel. Shin's smug grin annoyed Tsunade. Was she not a genius? She was indignant, but compared to Shin, she didn't seem that special. No, that wasn't right. She was a genius. It was just that Shin was a monster. By the way, Tsunade, you mentioned a reward. I think we earned it. Shin smiled. You did. Here's the strength of 100 seal. Since I'm your sensei now, I should teach you something. Tsunade handed them the scroll, surprising Shin. This was her signature technique. Besides medical ninjutsu, the strength of 100 seal was what she was known for. But don't teach it to anyone else. Tsunade said sternly. She was willing to teach them, but she didn't want it spreading. We're not idiots. We won't, Shin assured her. Thank you, Tsunade-sensei, Mikoto said gratefully. Look at Mikoto, so polite. She even called me sensei. Learn from her, you too. Tsunade glared at Shin and Kushina. Kushina glared right back, while Shin focused on the strength of 100 seal scroll. It involved precise chakra control, focusing chakra throughout the body, and releasing it in a burst of power, strong enough to shatter walls. Shin studied the scroll and realized it wasn't that difficult. It was simply a technique for unleashing explosive power with chakra. This is easy. Shin focused, controlling his chakra with ease. With his powerful mind and chakra control, this was child's play. He channeled chakra throughout his body, feeling it coat him like armor. So that was how Tsunade could withstand the recoil. The chakra acted as a buffer. This meant the strength of 100 seal wasn't just for offense, it could also be used defensively. Tsunade gaped at him. She had been annoyed when Shin called the technique easy, but now he was using it. He might not be displaying its power, but she could tell he had mastered it. But he was using it differently. She usually focused the chakra in one area, like her fist or leg. Shin, however, was channeling it throughout his body. Was this the privilege of having massive chakra reserves? You really are a monster, Tsunade said, shaking her head. It's not that difficult. Anyone with good chakra control can learn it. Shin was telling the truth. The strength of 100 seal was powerful and versatile, but it was easy to learn, no harder than a C-rank jutsu. Of course, that was assuming you had excellent chakra control. Kushina and Mikoto also started practicing. They couldn't master it instantly like Shin, but with his guidance, they learned it within half a day. You've all mastered tree climbing and water walking? No wonder you learned the strength of 100 seal so quickly. Tsunade was no longer surprised by their rapid progress. Well, I guess I have nothing left to teach you. Let's start taking missions tomorrow. She sounded a bit disappointed. Tsunade, want to learn a jutsu? Shin asked, a Rasengan swirling to life in his hand. Tsunade had taught them her secret technique. He didn't mind returning the favor. You're going to teach me that no-hand seals jutsu? Tsunade was surprised. Not many shinobi were willing to share their jutsu. Of course. You taught us your secret strength of 100 seal technique. It's only fair that I teach you something in return. Besides, don't you want to learn it? Well, since you're offering, I suppose I'll learn it, Izunade said with a playful arrogance. Shin's lips twitched. He hadn't expected Tsunade to be so tsundere. He explained the Rasengan training method to Tsunade and even provided personal guidance. But even so, it wasn't something that could be mastered quickly. It would take at least a few days. This Rasengan is pretty good, but I don't see how it's useful for me, Tsunade said. No hand seal's jutsu were powerful, but her fists were just as strong. Why bother with the Rasengan when she could just punch her enemies? Don't underestimate the Rasengan. It has a lot of potential. The basic Rasengan is a non-elemental jutsu, but you can add chakra nature transformations to create even stronger jutsu, Shin explained. In the original story, Naruto had taken the Rasengan to incredible heights. And the Rasengan isn't limited to close-range combat. It can be used for long-range attacks as well. Shin held out his hand, chakra gathering and swirling into a Rasengan. He increased the chakra output, the pale blue sphere deepening in color. Then he threw it. The Rasengan struck a rock 30 meters away, exploding on impact, pulverizing the rock and creating a small crater. You can throw the Rasengan? Kushina gasped. Yes, but you need to make it more condensed and stable. Naruto, in the original story, couldn't throw the Rasengan, but Shin, after some research, had figured it out. The reason the Rasengan couldn't be thrown was that its unstable rotation would cause it to dissipate once it left the user's control. By increasing its stability, it could be thrown. But this came with a drawback: increased chakra consumption. Making the Rasengan more stable required more chakra. A thrown Rasengan consumed 3 times the chakra of a regular Rasengan. It was a trade-off, but Shin had chakra to spare. For him, the benefits outweighed the costs. Kushina and Tsunade's eyes lit up as Shin explained how to throw the Rasengan. Mikoto, however, sighed. Shin had already taught her the Rasengan, but she couldn't throw it. She didn't have enough chakra. The Uchiha clan had decent chakra reserves, but they couldn't compare to the Senju and Uzumaki. Mikoto could barely create 2 Rasengan. It was an A-rank jutsu, after all. Even though it was less chakra-intensive than other A-rank jutsu, it still required a significant amount. Let's head back for today. Meet me at this training ground tomorrow, Tsunade said. You two go ahead. I'll train here for a bit. Tsunade nodded and left with Kushina and Mikoto. Kushina had wanted to stay, but Tsunade dragged her away. Once they were gone, Shin activated the mind's eye of Kagura, confirming that there was no one within several dozen kilometers. His eyes turned crimson, 3 black tomo swirling. The tomo spun faster and faster, merging into a 5-pointed shuriken shape. The Mangekyo Sharingan. The Sharingan was a reflection of the heart. When it evolved from the 3-tomo stage to the Mangekyo Sharingan, it awakened 3 new abilities. Besides the Susanoo, which was common to all Mangekyo Sharingan, the other 2 abilities were unique to each user, born from their deepest desires. The Mangekyo Sharingan could awaken incredibly powerful abilities, like Obito Uchiha's Kamui and Shursui Uchiha's Koto Amatsukami. And Shin's 2 abilities were perhaps even more broken. His left eye's ability was Yamatsu Hirasaka, the ultimate space-time ninjutsu. It allowed the user to travel between dimensions instantaneously, without the need for any markings or formulas. It was far superior to the Flying Thunder God jutsu. It was a jutsu that could only be used by those who possessed all 3 dojutsu, the Sharingan, Byakugan, and Rinnegan. In the original story, even including Boruto, only Kagaya Otsutsuki and Urashiki Otsutsuki could use this jutsu. But as Shin's Mangekyo ability, he could use it even without the Byakugan and Rinnegan. His right eye's ability was even more broken. It was called Tenmamai, and if Yamatsu Hirasaka controlled space, Tenmamai controlled time. It allowed Shin to rewind his personal time by 3 minutes. 3 minutes might not seem like much, but in battle, it was a game-changer. If he was injured, he could rewind time and undo the damage. Unless someone could kill him instantly, they wouldn't be able to harm him. He could be injured 1 second and perfectly fine the next. And combined with Yamatsu Hirasaka, his survivability was practically unmatched. Am I really that afraid of death? Shin chuckled to himself. He decided to test his new abilities. He took out a kunai and slashed his arm. His clothes tore, but his skin was unharmed. Shin blinked. Had his skin become so tough that even a kunai couldn't pierce it? Looks like I'll have to use the big guns. He took out a scroll and unsealed a sword. He made a small cut on his arm, then activated Tenmamai. The wound vanished instantly. His clothes, however, remained torn. It seemed Tenmamel only affected his body. Clothes were external objects. The jutsu didn't apply to them. The chakra and dojutsu strain, however, was significant. Using Tenmamai didn't rewind the chakra and dojutsu exhaustion he had experienced. Shin experimented with Yamatsu Hirasaka. This technique could be used offensively, to shorten the distance for long-range jutsu, or to disrupt and ambush opponents. It could also be used defensively, for evasion and escape. It was incredibly versatile. The chakra cost was manageable, but the strain on his eyes was significant. His Mangekyo Sharingan had limited ocular power. If he didn't have the perfect sage body, using these abilities a few times would risk blindness. Blindness was caused by depleting ocular power. Once depleted, the Mangekyo Sharingan's power couldn't be replenished. There were two ways to overcome this: evolve it into the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, or transplant Hashirama cells and survive. With his perfect sage body, Shin didn't have to worry about permanent blindness. His ocular power would regenerate, but he was concerned about running out mid-battle. Regeneration took time. In a fight, he wouldn't have time to wait for his eyes to recover. If he evolved his Mangekyo Sharingan into the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, he would have practically unlimited ocular power. The regeneration rate would match the consumption rate. He needed to find a way to evolve his Sharingan quickly. He wasn't worried, though. As long as he had time, he could evolve his Sharingan naturally. After awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan, Shin had sensed a resonance between his eyes and his body. Influenced by his perfect sage body, his ocular power was slowly increasing. Once it reached a certain threshold, his Mangekyo Sharingan would evolve into the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. The sage body and the Sharingan were indeed complementary, representing yin and yang, the perfect balance. Time to head hack. Kushina will be looking for me. Shin headed towards the Senju compound, his sword strapped to his back. This wasn't just any sword, it was the one he had taken from the Uzumaki Clan shrine. After some research, he discovered it was one of the Kusanagi swords. There were 11 Kusanagi swords in the Naruto world. Itachi Uchiha's Totsuka blade was one of them. Shin's Kusanagi sword didn't have the lengthening ability of Orochimaru's Kusanagi sword or the sealing ability of Itachi's Totsuka blade, but it did have the chakra-conducting ability of Sasuke's sword. Its greatest strengths were its durability and sharpness. It could cut through steel like butter. Shin didn't need any special abilities. He just needed a sword that could withstand his strength and swordsmanship. In his hands, it was the ultimate weapon. Back at the courtyard, he saw a feast laid out on the table. His face paled. Who made this? He looked at Tsunade and Kushina suspiciously. The food looked and smelled delicious, but to him, it was poison. I did, Mikoto said, emerging from the kitchen with a pot of miso soup. Oh, Mikoto! That's a relief. Shin sat down, ignoring Tsunade and Kushina's glares. Mikoto, you didn't go home? Why, Shin? Don't you want me here? Mikoto's gentle gaze made Shin feel a strange sense of danger. Was it just his imagination? Mikoto was so sweet. How could she be dangerous? Of course I'm glad you're here, Mikoto. I was just curious. I asked her to stay, Tsunade said. Knowing Mikoto had no family, Tsunade had invited her to stay, hoping she would keep Kushina company and prevent her from sneaking into Shin's room at night. Shin and Kushina were too old to be sharing a bed. Tsunade didn't want to see that. The next morning, Tsunade took Shin, Kushina, and Mikoto to the Hokage's office to accept a mission. They didn't need to see the Hokage for ordinary missions. He'd be overwhelmed. But as new graduates, if they wanted to take on missions above D rank, they needed his approval. Sandame, I want to take on a higher-level mission. Please sign this application. Tsunade placed the form in front of Hiruzen. A higher-level mission? Hiruzen frowned, glancing at Shin, Kushina, and Mikoto. No, he said, shaking his head. They're new graduates. They should start with D-rank missions to gain experience. What kind of experience? How to be better farmers. So they can become farmers or pig breeders if they fail as shinobi. Hiruzen's lips twitched. Tsunade had a point. D-rank missions were mostly useless and didn't provide any real training. But what if they're in danger? I'll take responsibility. Just sign the form. Tsunade slammed the form on his desk. Fine. Hiruzen sighed and signed the form. With Tsunade leading the team, he wasn't that worried. Tsunade took them to the mission assignment desk. What kind of mission do you want? She asked. Something with blood, Shin said after exchanging glances with Kushina and Mikoto. The type of mission didn't matter, as long as it helped Kushina and Mikoto grow. For a new genin, the best way to grow was to kill someone. If you didn't have the resolve to kill, you shouldn't be a shinobi. It wasn't a merciful profession. Killing was part of the job. Tsunade nodded. Let's take this C-rank mission, Bandit Extermination. She handed the form to the mission desk clerk and accepted the mission. Bandit Extermination was a common mission for genin teams. Being a bandit in the shinobi world was a tough job. New graduates, after completing a few D-rank missions, would move on to higher-level missions. Facing enemy shinobi directly was out of the question. Sending new graduates against experienced shinobi was suicide. But they needed to experience real combat, to kill, to become true shinobi. Killing innocent people was unacceptable. Shinobi weren't executioners. So, bandits were the next best thing. They were a menace, and killing them was a public service. In the shinobi world, bandits were both hated and pitied. They were constantly being hunted, serving as stepping stones for new graduates. Alert! New mission available. View. The system's voice echoed in Shin's mind. Shin opened the mission panel and saw the Bandit Extermination mission. Bandit Extermination. Eliminate the bandits near Nishimura. Reward: 1 common replication card. Failure: no penalty. A system mission. Shin was finally seeing another mission, the first one since arriving in Konoha 5 years ago. And a chance to get another replication card. Even a common card was valuable to him. Currently, he had 3 replication cards. The system gifted him 1 card annually. In the past 4 years, he had received 4 cards, 1 advanced and 3 common. He hadn't used the advanced cards yet. They were precious, capable of copying Kekkei Genkai. He had used the common cards to copy Sharingan prowess. That was how he had awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. By accumulating enough ocular power through repeated copying, he had forced his Sharingan to evolve. He had copied the Sharingan prowess of Uchiha Jonin 7 times. Combined with his own training, that was enough to push his Sharingan to the next level. Shin immediately accepted the mission. He was going on this mission anyway. Getting a replication card was a bonus. System, will you issue missions that match the missions I take on? Shin was excited by the possibility. If that were the case, he could become a mission master, grinding missions to farm system rewards. Do not get your hopes up, master. There is no pattern to the system's mission assignments. The system's response dashed his hopes, leaving him disappointed. Shin, let's go. What are you daydreaming about? Kushina nudged him. Shin snapped back to reality and followed Kushina and Mikoto. They didn't know he had been communicating with the system. Tsunade-san. What a coincidence. We meet again. A ninja with light blue hair, a handsome face, and a jonin vest greeted Tsunade. Tsunade frowned. Kato-dan, this is the 5th time this week. The first time was a coincidence. The second time, maybe. But the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Really? Her bluntness made Dan's smile falter. That's Kato-dan. Why is Tsunade so cold to him? Shin observed Dan. Dan looked at Shin and the others, seemingly trying to deflect the awkwardness. These must be your students. You're Uzumaki Shin, right? I'm Kato-dan. Nice to meet you. Dan smiled at Shin. But Shin sensed malice. He trusted his instincts. After awakening the mind's eye of Kagura, he had gained the ability to sense negative emotions directed at him. Dan might be smiling, but his malice was clear to Shin. Shin frowned. He had never interacted with Dan before. Why the hostility? Was it because of Tsunade? Was he jealous of Shin's closeness to Tsunade? But that didn't make sense. Who would be jealous of a 10-year-old? Whatever the reason, Dan clearly disliked him. Shin wasn't going to be polite. He glanced at Dan, then ignored him completely. Dan's smile became strained. His eyes flashed with anger, then he turned and left with his team. He was also a Jonin sensei, leading a team of genin who had graduated last year. You don't seem to like him very much. Tsunade looked at Shin with amusement. Are you jealous that he's talking to me? Do you have a crush on me, little Shin? Even though you're young, if you confess your feelings, I might be impressed by your courage and give you a chance. Shin's lips twitched. Tsunade, you're so self-centered. I was rude to him because he was giving me bad vibes. It has nothing to do with you. Yeah, Tsunade, you're so full of yourself. Shin likes me, don't you, Shin? Kushina suddenly clung to Shin's arm. Brat, I gave you a chance, and you didn't take it. Tsunade raised her fist playfully, aiming for Shin's head. He dodged easily. Tsunade, with that violent temper, you'll never get married, Shin teased. Tsunade scowled. If I can't find anyone else, I'll marry you. And if you refuse, I'll castrate you. Shin quickly backed away, feeling a chill in his nether regions. Kushina's expression changed. Shin didn't like violent girls. Should she try to be more gentle? She glanced at Mikoto, her eyes filled with suspicion. Mikoto was gentle. Would Shin like her? And from Kushina's observations, Mikoto seemed to like Shin. She was a rival. She had thought Tsunade, the cougar, was her biggest threat, but it seemed Mikoto was the one to watch out for. Mikoto was confused by Kushina's sudden hostility. She had no idea what was going on in Kushina's mind. Shin, you said Dan was giving you bad vibes? Tsunade looked at Shin. Yeah, don't you believe me? Tsunade shook her head. I believe you. And there's something else that's been bothering me. What is it? Shin asked curiously. Want to know? A mischievous smile spread across Tsunade's face. Shin had a bad feeling about this. If you want to know, come here and let me pinch your cheeks. On second thought, I don't need to know that badly, Shin rolled his eyes. Brat, don't try to weasel your way out of this. You promised to let me pinch your cheeks if I kept your strength a secret. What promise? Sorry, I have a bad memory. Kushina, did I promise Tsunade anything? Shin asked innocently. Nope, I don't remember anything, Kushina shook her head. She wasn't going to let Tsunade take advantage of Shin. Tsunade glared at them. These two brats. Fine, I'll tell you. Kato Dan asked me about you a while back. I thought it was strange, but I didn't think much of it at the time, Tsunade said, giving in. Shin frowned. Dan had asked about him. They had never even interacted. Why would he do that? Had he met Dan before? Shin thought it over, but he couldn't think of anything. He had been keeping a low profile in Konoha. He didn't know enough about Dan to understand his motives.